I will be in a second. My computer is freezing, if you can even hear me.
I can.
Okay. Okay, mine's recording too.
Perfect. So it looks like we're supposed to discuss hold on.
Yes, the Home for Marlin case study.
I can start if everyone's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I feel like if anything, our cohort in general does a fantastic job of viewing dilemmas from like the 4 different frameworks of the conceptual, like the humanistic and the political. And I think like collectively we have a good group of like all 4 frameworks. And I feel like even reading the case study where you can start seeing it from different frameworks, I feel like with dilemmas, a lot of times it really just depends on what framework you're coming from to solving the dilemma or responding to the dilemma. So I don't entirely agree with the case study where it wouldn't let the foster parents and the foster family entirely in the dark, because that's not how the foster system works. There's a response. It's a Resource Family Care Act, and it's a literal law that gives a scope and sequence of each child that's entering the house. So it says, it like gives it access to information about medical behavior, family and educational history. So I don't think this foster family would go into Marlin completely blind, like Jim is assuming.
I agree with that, because I was looking at as well, and I was looking through the slideshow, and it talked about the Uninterrupted Scholars Act of 2013. And in that act, it does state that any agency that's responsible for the child's care and protection can disclose that information. So it is not Jim's job to share that information with the family. It is the foster care agency's responsibility and job, like you're saying, because that is clearly what that act is for and what it states.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts, and I saw that in the slide deck, or like the, I guess, like PowerPoint that we had to go through as well. But if that weren't the case, because in the case study it kind of seemed like that like wasn't a thing, that act like didn't exist, and like the state law was the state law, like the parents weren't going to know anything, then like he really shouldn't be telling the family, because he would be violating, I guess, state law that surrounds the information sharing within the foster system, but also FERPA, because now all that information is in his educational file at the school level. But also the foster mom like works at the school. So if he ended up in like one of her classes or something, like if he was like receiving SPED services, which it sounds like he maybe was, like based on some of his behaviors, like she would have access to that too. So I don't know.
Sarah, I concur with your sentiment, and I also want to piggyback off of your thoughts where going back to the PowerPoint slide on FERPA, some records that are not covered under FERPA is law enforcement records. And where in the case study, it kind of alluded that he's had a history of like sexual misconduct, that 100% would be in law enforcement records, which would also, the family would be able to be privy to those records, and it wouldn't be a violation of FERPA.
Yeah, and it seems like if he, like this would be on the foster care system and not necessarily the principal, but like if he had a history of like any kind of like sexual abuse or something like that of others, like they would have looked out for a family and not placed him somewhere there was other kids in the house. So seems like less of an ethical dilemma for the principal and more of an ethical, or I guess he's not the principal, and more of an ethical dilemma for like people running the foster care system in this case study.
I completely agree with you. It's a lack of placement. Like they put these kids where it's the most successful placement, and I really feel like the foster care system, whatever state he's in, has dropped the ball, because he should not be placed with small children.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting in the case study that he first started by like wanting to communicate this information to the family he's with, Marlon is with, but then he started looking at it with the ethic of care for Marlon himself, and how obviously like he's the one that has never had a stable household. And I thought that was really interesting how he flipped his thinking and put that ethic of care into practice for him versus just his family friends. I just thought that was something interesting he did as he went through the process.
Well, Kelly, I'm glad you brought that to the surface because, again, there's always two sides to a story. And, obviously he has the best interest of the family, which also he has conflicting viewpoints because he personally knows this family and is friends with this family. So it kind of has also skewed his scope and his lens viewing this. But Marlon deserves a shot. And too often these kids are kind of the forgotten children in the system that just get pushed aside, but he deserves a chance to be happy. He deserves a chance for a family. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. As much as like, I think it would be ridiculous for a family not to know some of this information, I kind of also understood because for like a kid like him that has this like really lengthy history, like if this family had found out about a lot of that, it's very clear that they would have just like sent him right back to like the state or wherever he came from before he came to this family. So I agree, Kira. I see both sides to it, and both sides are hard to see.
There's also a bill, it's called the Foster Care Bill of Rights, and as foster families placements for possible new members of their family or just even placements temporary, they are privy to a lot of information, and it's called the Foster Care Bill of Rights. And so Sarah, you made a point that like you felt like the case study kind of didn't have all these bills, and I agree because I'm like, none of this would be an issue because like this is already stuff that's like been accountable for now. So
are those new bills and right? Like, are those new, or was this case study like? What I'm wondering is this case study from so far ago that these like bills and laws and everything were not in place to communicate that information. Did I miss something in the case study about that? Like that it's.
No, I don't know. I feel like these case studies are definitely a little dated. So I feel like it's very possible that some of these laws may have come into place after these were written.
Okay. I was just curious.
Any other thoughts? Okay.
Jim also kept repeating this, always be a voice, always be a voice. And I highlighted that because I thought that was such a beautiful sentiment. He wants to be the voice of this family that he knows. He wants to be a voice of Marlon. And oftentimes educators, even school leaders, how often are we in dilemmas where we want to be a voice, but we want to be a voice for all. But I feel like in this dilemma, just because I feel like it was kind of backdated before all these laws and acts were incorporated, I feel like how can you be a voice for both sides in this dilemma? And I guess that's the point of the case study.
Yeah, is how you can advocate for both sides. No, I agree with that 100%. He wants to be that we should be a voice for everybody, and being able to navigate those difficult situations is really important as a school leader.
Okay, I stopped mine.